And, you know, when I started thinking about this, you know, I had to get to thinking, is there really a cell phone addiction? Do y'all think there is? Do you think there's a smartphone addiction? So when I did some research on it, and they're saying that, you know, there's this research group called Pew, P-E-W, Researchers Center, and they said that 81% of people in America own smartphones. 81%. That's a large percentage. And they also indicate that there is a continued rise in the sale of smartphones. And also, I found that, you know, in the DSM, which is a diagnostic tool that we all use, you know, in the business to make diagnosis, is that cell phone addiction is the closest to hi, John, how are you? Is the closest that cell phone addiction is like a sister to gambling addiction. It does the same thing. It hits that brain quickly. It activates the dopamine instantly, you know, and that's how gambling does. And it just keeps feeding that brain, and then it needs more and more and more and more. And so there is a diagnosis of cell phone addiction, smartphone addiction. And I had thought that there was, but I didn't know for sure. And so in the research that I did, that it shows that there is. And so some of the symptoms, let me ask you, well, I'm not going to ask that, but anyway, I was going to ask you if you think you have a problem with the cell phone. But some of the symptoms of having been addicted to your phone is the number one thing is loss of control. Loss of control in your life, that your life is taking place on the cell phone. And you know, and it does affect a lot of times your work, your family, but anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. And the loss of control is one. Two is persistence, is that having difficulty limiting the amount of time you spend on the phone, that just persistence after it. And that's what gamblers do. I mean, they are persistent over and over to get that high, that rush. And then three is the tolerance changes. There's a need to stay on the phone more and more and more and more and more and more. Tolerance changes. And then four is having some severe negative consequences, such as a car wreck. I had a dear friend, or have a dear friend, who lives here in Abilene, that I guess it was over 10 years ago, her son was coming in from Texas Tech for the weekend, and he was already in town. It was on the bypass, and he decided to text his mother and let her know where he was. And he had a car wreck while texting his mother, and he was killed in that car wreck. And that is how severe this telephone addiction can be. You know, years ago, I mean, in my age, you know, and there's people on here, I'm the oldest one now in most any room, but anyway, at my age, when we went on a trip or we went anywhere away from you know, our phone, those big old phones that we had, you know, sitting somewhere in the family room or something, but if we went somewhere and if we needed to make a telephone call, we had to stop the car, we had to find a payphone somewhere. Do y'all remember those days? We had to stop and be intentional to make one telephone call. We didn't stand there on that payphone and call and call and call and call and keep calling people. We made the call and then we got back in the car and continued. Whether we were just in town or on a trip. If you needed to contact someone, you had to do it with intention and get out of the car, find one. It was usually at a, you could usually find them at a little grocery store or something. But anyway, so tolerance has changed. Severe negative consequences, such as having a car wreck. My grandson Spencer, always try to work him into everything I do on these. But anyway, when he was in the 5th grade, they had a science project, and he chose research in texting. And then his mom had got, anyway, I won't go into all how they tested it, but it was mind-boggling what can happen and what happens to the brain when we're texting while driving. That was what the research, that was what his science project was, and what it can do to the brain. And then another reason that, so you have negative consequences, and another thing that makes it an addiction is withdrawal. Feeling lost or irritable or having anxiety if you can't get to your phone, or if you're somewhere where you can't use your phone. You go into withdrawal. And then, the number 6, and this is true for any addiction, this is how they determine if there is, how the American Medical Association even has determined alcoholism being a disease, is if it has a relapse component. And cell phone addiction has a relapse component, because you might get on a program where you're not using your cell phone as much, and then all of a sudden you're back into it. One of the things is, and this is many years ago, we were treating a young woman here, and her family week came up, and her little sister was here, and her little sister was about 14 years old. And this is one of the reasons we have family weeks. The clients always think it's about them. Partly it's about them, but it's mainly about the family and how they're affected, and maybe any other addictions in the family. So this 13 or 14-year-old sister, it was about the 3rd day of family week. And after we did just the morning meet and greet, she started crying. And I asked her what was wrong, and she said, well, that she was missing her cell phone, And then we got to talking about her cell phone and how she gets her good feelings about herself from all of the likes. If she puts something on and there's, people like it, those, y'all know what I'm talking about, the likes. And she was telling her parents that before they came up to Buffalo Gap, that the night before, that she was wanting to kill herself because she put something on her phone and she didn't get one like. Now that's how serious this deal is about cell phones, and how it affects teenagers. They get their good feelings about themselves off of the cell phone and off of the response of the cell phone. So, just keep that in mind. And so some of the symptoms of, more symptoms is you reach for your phone the moment you're alone or bored. Think about it. The minute you're alone or you're bored, or you don't even have to be alone, but the minute you think about your cell phone, you pick it up. You wake up multiple times of the night and look at your cell phone. Just check in your Facebook, or just, that's a sign. Number 3, and that interrupts your sleep patterns, by the way. It's one thing to wake up, get up, and go to the bathroom. It's another thing to pick up that cell phone, and it will trigger, going to the bathroom doesn't trigger the dopamine in your brain, but picking up that cell phone and looking at it will, and it will interfere with the sleep pattern. So number 3 is feeling anxious, upset, or short-tempered when you can't use your phone. When you're in a situation where you can't use your phone. Think about that. You get short-tempered, you get angry. Another one is and we've already said this, that your phone has caused you to have an accident. Now this is how you know when you have an addiction to a telephone, that you have had some form of an accident while using your phone and you continue to do it. And another one is you're spending more and more time on your phone. You know, love is spelled Time, and a lot of times family members will be sitting in the room with each other, and instead of visiting with each other, they are on their cell phones. Now, I do want to make a little clarity about that. My oldest daughter, Karen, is here with us. She's moderating, and I have noticed that when we're all together and having conversation about something, I'll notice Karen on her cell phone. And what I make up is she's not interested in the conversation, that she is interested in, texting someone. But I asked her one day, and what she does when we're having a conversation, she's doing research about what is going on. And I think that's a good thing. And then she'll report it to us, Now, if it goes to the extreme and then, somebody just stays on there and researches and doesn't jump back into the conversation, that probably can be a problem. But see, I made up, this is what we do, what we don't know, we make up. And I'd made up that she was having a conversation with somebody that she'd rather talk to than us, and what she was doing was some research. You can find anything you want on that telephone, and a lot of things you don't want. A lot of things you don't need to want. A lot of things we don't need to get into can be found on that cell phone. All righty, so another thing is you're spending more and more and more time. Oh, I've already said that. Love is spelled Time, and it takes time to really show your love to family members. And when we're on our phones more than we're with them, it can make a difference in their lives. And then when your phone interferes with your job performance, your schoolwork, and your relationships. I have used to, when I was over at the center more, I've had employees, particularly people who have entered the phone, that will be using their cell phone more than they use Shade's phone, and I have had them to put their phones up. I've had them to leave their phones at home or in the car or whatever, because it can interfere with work. And that distraction, and schoolwork. A lot of kids do work on, do school work on the phone, and then they'll stray off and get into those games or whatever. And then it affects relationships. It can really affect relationships. And then when people get concerned about you, when they get concerned about your telephone use, with any addiction, I don't care what it is, usually the family knows the client or the addict is in trouble long before the addict realizes it. The family members, the loved ones, they notice. And they'll usually notice where there is a problem with your phone use, because it takes you away from the family. I know on holidays, and now we don't even have to do it, but used to, I would put a basket out, like on Thanksgiving when we're getting ready to have a meal. I'd put a basket out and I'd say, okay, everybody put their cell phones in here. And we make it kind of a fun thing, but people do. And to my knowledge, no one ever brings their phone to a dinner table anymore, unless it's Cam and she's carrying her phone for business purposes. We want her to carry that phone. Or if one of them, the therapists, are on call, then they have to have the phone with them at all times. So there are exceptions. And cell phones, they're so beneficial. Part of this, not all, but some of this research I got off the cell phone, off the smartphone. But it's so, I'm not putting down the smartphone. It is when we overuse, anything that we overuse can become an addiction. And I remember treating a young man at the Serenity House, which was an alcohol drug program, and came in from another town, and what his parents said and what he said is he was genius level. He had a brain of a genius. He had been tested. He was a genius. And I felt a little inferior. I thought, oh, well. But anyway, he made a great client. He got in, got detoxed. We had him in the program. And I was working on his update on his treatment plan one day. And he said, Mrs. McCarty, one of these days, you will be able to sit at a computer. Now, at that time, computers were usually 3 or 4 buildings, 3 or 4 stories high that would cover a whole block. Do y'all remember that? I mean, the computers were huge. Only banks, governments, all of that had computers. They were huge. There was no personal computers around. And what this young man said, he said, Mrs. McCarty, it won't be long till you will be able to sit in front when you'll have a computer, a small computer in front of you, and you can do my treatment plan, and then you can tap on there and find out if I have been in any other treatment center. And what I thought of that young man, I thought he had dropped one too many acids, or had smoked too many of those funny cigarettes. I thought, yeah, you're a genius and you're making up all this stuff. He was right. He was so right. And, that's been over 40 years ago. He was in his early 20s. I saw him a couple of years ago at a AA conference, and he came up to me. We're both older. He's in his 60s, and he's helped develop a lot of the programs. And anyway, I got to make my amends to him. I said, I thought you were just filling me with a bunch of stuff. But anyway, he was smart, and he could see the future. And so another thing is, if you try to limit your use of the telephone, and it affects your feelings, you can tell that you have a problem because you're in relapse. You'll notice that, if you yearn for your phone, you'll notice that you have, that you do have a problem with phones. Okay, and also when you are trying to limit your use, and anyway, I've already said that, and the consequences of overusing the cell phone, you may experience more of them. So what happens is, what the results of all of this is that it can produce anxiety, and this is not my research, but it is overuse of the phone can produce anxiety, depression, sleep disorders. We have had people come in here that would, and now I know that they were detoxing from their telephone. They would cry for their phone. Can I make one call, just one call? Can I hold my phone? And, it didn't really dawn on me that we were dealing with telephone addiction. It didn't. But it can produce anxiety, depression, and sleep disorders. And research has shown this over and over. And what it's also shown, that when people get so addicted to their phones, what they're trying to do is to not feel some kind of difficult or painful something that has happened in their life that is unresolved. And so research has shown, in order to get healthy over any addiction, and we're talking about phone addiction, is to resolve the underlying issues, those underlying causes and conditions that could be the key to producing the anxiety. And then you escape life and escape through using the phone. So, I'm always gonna, not always, but anyway, I'm gonna put a plug in for our intensive. That's what we do in those 4.5-day intensives, is we get down to those core issues. We get down to what is driving any addiction, whatever it is. And it's the core issues. And once we can get in there and help you lance, part of that, and really, have a release through the anger or whatever process we use to help you get through to resolve the issue. First of all, you've got to identify the issue. You've got to really identify the issue. And for most of us, it starts in childhood. And what I always say, we do those intensives and we do the work we do here at Shades, not to make your parents bad, awful, or wrong. It's not that. Some of the childhood issues we've dealt with has been, kids being, abused by people other than the family members, or bullying in school. So there's different forms of trauma. And so that has to be resolved. And when you have that and you're carrying around that kind of pain, it is so easy to reach out to that phone and look and maybe play a game or see how many likes you've gotten on something. It is that almost like that hand to mouth of using food, or using the, whatever form of gambling. It is that action that takes away the pain of reality. That's why we do addicts, we're not a bunch of idiots. If we didn't get relief from what we're using, we'd quit doing it. But it helps make us feel better, until the thing that we're using that's making us feel better makes us feel worse and causes some of these problems in our lives. So what do we do about it? When you find that you have to use something to escape your life, and today that we're talking about the phone, you might need to look at that and really get a good assessment over it and do some work around it. And like I'm saying, you might, if you're compulsive about texting or buying, we could do a whole show on buying, of compulsive spending on the phone. It is done in private. It is done, you can just do it and then push that one button. And anyway, y'all know about that. So if you're using your phone to overtext or to overbuy or to pin or to tweet or to swipe or to post constantly, you might have a problem with the phone. We were with a friend the other day, all day long, from early morning. We went on a little road trip, and we were on this road trip all day from early morning until around 9 or 10 at night. And I believe the only time that woman put down her phone, and then I think she had one hand on it, was when she was eating a meal. She was on that phone constantly. And if we would say anything, she would repeat what we were saying. So she was listening to us out of one ear, but on this texting with the other one. And so it really, after a while, you just lose interest in the conversation. You lose interest in that person because they are not there, even though they can. By the way, when folks were around folks who have ADD, they can multitask, so they can hear part of the conversation while being on the phone. That is socially very inappropriately, I think. What would have been best is for the woman to not go on the trip, to say, no, I need to stay home and be on my phone. So anyway, just throwing that in a little bit. So how to get over doing this? One of the things to do is remove time-consuming apps. There is an app on the phone for anything that you want to do. Is that true? Some of them are very helpful, and some of them are just time consuming. So do an inventory about your apps and what do you need and what you don't need, and get rid and ask yourself, is that taking up time that I could be spending with my kids or my husband or going to a meeting? And I will tell you, during this pandemic, the cell phone, the smartphone has kept us connected in ways of, meetings and all. So I'm not putting the cell phone down. It's the overuse of it. Another thing, number 2, is choose your settings to eliminate disruptions, on these disruptive alerts. I'll be sitting talking with someone and something will ping, or something will buzz, or something will jingle, or that, and it's a reminder of something or whatever, and that's very disruptive. So look at that. How many of them do you really need on your phone? And had you rather be with someone in person, or have your, where you can engage in conversation? Because when you get a disruption off your phone, you're going to turn to it and usually answer it. So number 3, set your screen on grayscale to keep it from waking you up at night, or you might turn that phone off. If you have a landline, turn the phone your cell phone, smartphone completely off, because if there's an emergency, someone could get a hold of you. But you have to be intentional with these things if you really want to get better on the overuse of your phone. Another thing is, when you're at home or at work, keep your phone out of sight. You don't have to carry it around. I was at shopping yesterday, or looking mostly, but I saw these pants, of women, and I didn't even know they made them, but they were workout pants, tight things. And all of them had these long side pockets, and I thought, what in the world is that for? Then it dawned on me, that's for their cell phone. So they can carry that cell phone in those tight pants, exercise pants, with them everywhere, even when they're exercising. But anyway, so one of the recommendations is keep the phone out of sight. If you really want to cut down on your phone use. Another thing is, develop some hobbies. Develop something that can feed your soul. Develop something that you get excited about, that you will, rather than living, vicariously through someone else on the cell phone. Get excited about something. Gardening, take yourself outside, doing something where you can maybe get out and meet people, like meeting up with friends. A lot of times a friendship is just over the smartphones. It's spent on the phones, exchanging pictures and talking and texting, and not taking the time to go see each other. And I'm guilty of that. I'm really guilty of that. I've got a dear friend here in Buffalo Gap I haven't seen in a long time, and I'll just text her every once in a while. So I'm going to make a commitment. I'm going to go visit with her. And then, or I could pick up the phone and call her. See, I do not like to talk on the telephone. I don't know if anyone knows that, but I've never liked to talk on the telephone. I don't like long-winded telephone conversations. And now that I have arthritis and broke both shoulders, I don't like to hold the phone that long. And so, when I'm using the phone, I can put it on, where I can hear it, where I don't have to hold my phone. But anyway, I text more than that's my way of communicating, is texting. And I'm the texting queen. I'd rather do that than to call someone, because I'm in control of the communication. When I get tired of texting, I'll just say, okay, bye, and that's it, done. That's called control. And then another thing that you could do is listen to music, or if you're musically inclined, talented, create music. I mean, isn't that a deal? Or do artwork. Do something, create something that you can actually see and put your hands on. Or do volunteer work. If you want to meet people, if you're lonely, get out and do volunteer work. You'll be amazed at the folks that you will find getting out and doing volunteer work. Now, I am going to say how you're going to find those places to volunteer is using your smartphone. So we're not saying, all or nothing here, but it's like looking at the use of the cell phone. What's it taken away from your life? What's it taken away from your children, your family, your work? Is there a problem? And if there is, you might want to look at a solution. So that's what I have about the telephone. And I will tell you, I don't even know why I decided to do this, but I didn't realize how big a problem it has turned out to be in the United States, and particularly with young people. That's how they have relationships, is with people through the smartphone. And they can also get into a lot of big time trouble on the smartphone, because when you get on that smartphone and you can hook up with people, and you can be 13 years of age, and people on the other end think they're dealing with a 25-year-old or something. So it can be dangerous. So anyway, that's what I have. Let's talk. Who wants to share about your use of the cell phone? And do you overuse it? Is it a problem for you? So who wants to start?